Over a decade ago, I boarded a plane and went to explore the grasslands, or savannas, of Africa. I'd just gotten out of school, and the idea of working with animals and observing their behaviour intrigued me to no end. I'd spend all night in a tiny apartment reading about encounters, attacks, and stories told by those native to the area. I was quite involved with an online group of people who shared the same interests as me. Some were professors, some were students, biologists, rangers, and so many more. That's where I met Trick. Well, his name is Patrick, but he hates when people call him that. Our friendship was instantaneous. Soon enough, we were planning a trip to Africa. I know, it seems wild and thoughtless, but I was 23 years old and adventurous. The world had so much to offer, and I wanted to experience it all. Together, we found a guy who was going to guide us and make sure we stayed within the correct perimeter. He knew the line where safe met dangerous and observation met attack. It wasn't a line we wanted to cross. Our guide's name was Han, and he was rugged and intimidating. Also, he smelled like gasoline, and we could never pinpoint why. The years wore his face down to tanned wrinkles and an adamant frown. "You two kids need to understand something," he'd said, and I remember the gruff, gravelly tone in his voice like I'd heard it yesterday. "My word, whatever I say will be what keeps you from getting killed." Sounded like he had an authority complex, but we shrugged and nodded along. He was the expert after all. The air was hot, feathering over my face, and the land seemed to stretch on forever. Trees were sparse, but the tall, wispy grass concealed the ground effortlessly. I remember feeling so small, so vulnerable. The sun drowned me in an intense heat, and sweat dripped relentlessly from every pore on my skin. While we set our stuff down in a well-built and sturdy tent, Han continued his speech. "We can go out in a few hours if you want to try see the lions hunt. They prefer to hunt at night." "Sounds good to me." I looked over at Trick, who seemed confident and excited. "Yeah, me too." Trick didn't shut up the entire time we got our stuff ready to head out. His voice wavered in eagerness, and he was practically bouncing off the walls of the tent. "Mikey, do you think we'll see anything tonight? Mikey, do you think they'll see us as their prey? Mikey, do you think you can stomach watching an animal get killed right in front of you?" The questions didn't stop until Han hastily pulled open our tent door. "Here." He threw a tightly wadded bag at us. "Those are some supplies you're gonna need." Cotton-scented candles?" I looked up to meet Han's eyes. "You'll see why. Don't question me on anything." "Lions must not like the smell of cotton," Trick joked. Han let out a humorous laugh. "It ain't just lions I'm trying to protect you from, kid." And with that, he swiftly left, calling out a 5-minute warning before we'd start our first journey. I'm not going to lie and say that Han's words didn't leave a pit of unease in my stomach. I rationalized by telling myself he meant other predators, like hyenas or something, though I admit I never heard of using a specific scented candle to ward off any species before. The tires on the Jeep cruised over the land easily, and the breeze dulled the sting of the setting sun. Orange painted the blue sky and left the land blanketed in shades of warmth. After a while, the sky darkened, and I saw more stars than I ever have before. God, those stars were beautiful. "Pretty, ain't it?" Han yelled over the engine. "Yeah," I yelled back. Han continued driving, and I noticed Trick's comfortable posture on the other side of the Jeep. His arm hung out of the window, his hand waving against the wind. We pulled over, not too far behind a huge single tree. With binoculars, a defense weapon, a heavy jacket, and our damn candles, we set up beneath the protection of the trunk. Han sat between us, making sure to light every single candle until we were encircled. "Why did you choose this area to come to?" Han asked out loud. I'm not going to say the exact area we visited, for reasons you'll later understand. Well, I began, but Trick's voice overpowered mine. "Lots of animal attacks here. Are the lions more aggressive? They seem to kill a lot of villagers around this area, more so than other areas." "That's not why we came here," I added in defense, but they both ignored me. Han let out another laugh, and the sound sent chills down my entire body. In reality, this excursion was cheaper than any others we looked into, by a crap ton. Ain't no lion ever attacked no one out here. Both Trick and I began to speak up, but Han held up his index finger, silencing us. "There's another predator out here. Even the lions don't mess with them. I told you when we first spoke on the phone that this place was dangerous, that you needed to listen to me, and everything would be fine, okay?" I vaguely remembered the first conversation Trick and I had with Han. He made us agree to be completely compliant and to understand the risks of dangerous encounters before he agreed to being our guide. I didn't press him further, but instead muttered a weak, "Okay," before gluing my eyes to the binoculars. A long time passed with nothing, not even a word spoken in the cool air. The wind rustled the grass around us and flickered the flame ever so slightly. Then, as if someone had hit the mute button on a television, everything went dead quiet. Not the kind of quiet you think. I'm talking about a deafening quiet. No bugs, no sound of the wilderness around us. It was like we were in a vacuumed box. And the air felt still, similar the way the static built up before a terrible storm. My whole body felt rigid, like cardboard. Every hair stood on end. Part of me wanted to take off running. The other part tried desperately to listen to the sound of my beating heart. Han visibly tensed, his eyes serious as he looked at both of us. Softly but sternly, he whispered, "Don't leave this circle." He gestured to the candles that surrounded us. "Please." "What's out there?" Trick asked. Panic was obvious in his face. His hands trembled. Han stayed silent, taking in a shallow breath. The flames from the candles lit up a small space around us and brought attention to every detail in our worried faces. But the flames, wouldn't they attract attention to us? "Han," I began, "won't the fire—" "No." "What?" I started to ask, but he put his finger to my lips. "Listen." Han's face was focused, but something in his eyes looked almost happy, excited. I couldn't put a finger on it. It sounded like we all stopped breathing at once, and in the distance, we could hear the pounding of feet, like a stampede, but without the familiar sound of hooves. It was a deep thud, but rhythmic. I tried to swallow, but my mouth felt dry. With binoculars, I scanned the area to see what was approaching us, but couldn't see anything. I watched the grass, the way the blades melted into the black sky. I watched the horizon, the left, the right, panning over slowly until I saw them. They were blacker than the night sky, fast, skinny, and on all fours. The skin covering their visible bones looked wet, glossy. My stomach felt queasy, and the urge to sprint back to the Jeep was so intense I could barely keep myself grounded. My eyes were glued though. I couldn't look away. With every inhuman movement, quick and jumpy, my heart raced just a little bit faster. I knew my body was telling me to run, alerting me, trying to get me away from danger. But my mind told me to stay planted. Don't move. There were 3 of them. They ran around in jerky motions, but in a pack. They didn't look like any animal I had ever studied. I could see the way their muscles moved beneath a thin layer of skin, the way their bones seemed to stretch with every extension of their hind legs, like they were made of rubber. Then, suddenly, they stopped. All at once, they halted. And one stood, freaking stood on 2 legs. Its lips curled over curved, sharp, long teeth. It stretched its neck impossibly long, face looking towards the sky, and it sniffed the air. Shuffling started me, and I immediately looked over to Trick and Han. There was a horrified expression on Han's face, and the look of not just horror, not just betrayal, not just sadness, but pure dread. And I felt that all over me, from the tip of my hair to my toes. My heart dropped, and even the world felt slow, like a dream. No, nightmare, where time is morphed beyond comprehension. Trick was running toward the Jeep. I know he had seen them. His flight response had kicked in, and he bolted. The sound of his boots on the dirt were loud, excruciatingly loud, but nothing compared to the high-pitched scream that came from that thing. My eyes locked with Han's. The world sped back up, and I could hear them closing in on Trick. Not that they were very far anyway. I could feel my throat closing, my body burned, and at the same time, it felt so numb. The tickle from the tears in my eyes reminded me this was real, and I tried to focus on Han's face as he mouthed to me in complete silence. Quiet. I put my hands over my mouth. The tears began to blur my vision. I blinked them away. The stars. He looked terrified. He looked desperate for me to be as still and as quiet as possible. Look at the stars. Focus on them. I did as he said, and stared above me. I counted them as Trick's ear-splitting scream tore across the savannah. I tried so hard to keep my eyes fixed on the shapes the stars made. Don't look. Don't run. The sound of his screams turned into cries. The snapping of his bones echoed and popped. The ripping of his muscles and the blood-curdling chokes for air settled in every particle of my body. It's a sound I'll never forget. There's a dog in the stars. My eyes traced the shape of its tail. I stared at it until my head began to throb. It felt like hours had passed before the sounds stopped, before the screams died down, and the sound of chomping and chewing dissipated. The heavy smell of cotton overpowered the stench of blood. I don't even remember walking back to the Jeep. I definitely don't remember the sun coming up. I don't remember when the sound of grass swaying came back to life, and I don't remember the ride back to the tent. I do, however, remember the faint splash of blood that covered a tiny part of the ground. That was all that was left of him. I remember Han reporting another lion attack to the locals. I remember the numbness that covered my mind and body. I could hear Trick's voice. It played like a recording in my mind. I never asked why. I never asked Han why he brought us out there knowing what could happen, or why he didn't warn us. Part of me blames myself. Part of me blames him. I never asked him why the scent of cotton, specifically, was what covered our scent the best. My only guess is trial and error. I try not to think about it too much, but I relive it every night in my head. I try to forget and move on, but I simply can't. Could you? And I try to keep my story straight whenever anyone asks me why I hate anything to do with the stars.